The diner was small and worn, the kind of place most people passed by without a second glance. Its neon sign sputtered faintly in the night air, casting a weak pink glow on the cracked sidewalk. Inside, the booths were lined with faded red leather, some torn at the seams, and the air smelled of strong coffee mixed with frying bacon. Jamal had gotten used to it. He spent most of his evenings here, wiping tables, carrying dishes, and scrubbing counters for a few extra dollars. Every cent mattered. His mother worked long hours cleaning houses, and between rent, groceries, and the stack of bills that never seemed to shrink, money was always short. Jamal was only 17, but life had already pressed heavy responsibilities onto his shoulders. His sneakers were secondhand, his jacket thin and patched at the elbow, and though he smiled often, the tiredness in his eyes told a different story. Still, he carried himself with quiet pride, refusing to let anyone pity him. Tonight was like any other. He moved through the diner with a rag in hand, cleaning surfaces while humming softly to himself. As he reached the counter, his eyes drifted toward the corner booth by the window. An elderly couple sat there, leaning close to each other. The man's shoulders were stooped, his once strong hands trembling slightly as he lifted a spoon. His gray hair was thin, his coat frayed at the edges. Beside him sat a woman with soft lines on her face, her hands folded neatly in her lap as she smiled faintly at her husband. They had ordered just a bowl of vegetable soup and a single cup of coffee, placed between them as though it were a feast. Jamal, moving slowly with his rag, overheard their hushed conversation. "We'll share this," the woman whispered gently, pushing the bowl toward the man. "You take most of it, dear," he said, his voice weak but filled with love. "I'm not as hungry." She shook her head, giving him a look that said she had heard that lie before. They both laughed softly, though their laughter carried a weight of sorrow. Jamal noticed how carefully they dipped the spoon into the soup, how they savored each bite as though stretching the moment. It wasn't hard for him to put the pieces together. He had known hunger before. He had known what it was like to pretend to be full so someone else could eat. A knot tightened in his chest. He thought of his own mother, who often skipped meals, claiming she wasn't hungry, just so he could have a plate of rice or bread. He thought of the nights when his stomach growled and sleep didn't come easy, and of how his father's absence had left them both struggling. He couldn't watch the couple without feeling a tug deep inside his heart. Quietly, Jamal walked over to the cashier. He dug into his pocket and pulled out a few crumpled bills and some coins, the little bit he had managed to save for groceries that week. It wasn't much, but it would cover the elderly couple's meal. He set the money on the counter, lowering his voice so no one else would hear. "Put their bill on me," he said. The cashier blinked in surprise, looking at him. "Jamal, that's your money. Are you sure? You don't have to." "I want to," he interrupted softly, his tone firm though his voice trembled slightly. "They need it more than I do tonight." The cashier studied him for a moment, then nodded with quiet respect. "All right." Jamal walked back to his sink, picking up his rag again, pretending to be busy as the couple finished their small meal. When the man asked for the check, the waitress came over with a smile. "It's already been taken care of," she said gently. The couple froze. "Taken care of? By who?" the woman asked, her eyes widening. The waitress only smiled again and shook her head. "Someone wanted you to enjoy your evening." The old woman's lips trembled, tears welling in her eyes. She reached across the table and held her husband's hand tightly. The man looked around the diner, his gaze passing right over Jamal, who was scrubbing at a stubborn stain on the counter, pretending not to hear. With shaky steps, the couple rose from their booth. They paused at the door, looking back at the small diner as though they were leaving behind more than just a meal. The woman leaned her head against her husband's shoulder, and together they stepped out into the chilly night, their hands clasped. Jamal watched them from the corner of his eye, his heart swelling with a strange mixture of sadness and warmth. He didn't need them to know it was him. He didn't need thanks or recognition. What mattered was that, for one evening, they had eaten without worry, without counting pennies. That knowledge was enough. The diner grew quiet again, the hum of the jukebox filling the silence. Jamal continued with his work, the rag moving slowly in his hand, but inside he felt lighter. He knew his mother would be upset when she found out he had spent money meant for groceries, but he also knew she would understand. She had always taught him that kindness wasn't about what you had to spare, but what you were willing to give, even when you didn't have much. And so, as the night wore on and the last customers left, Jamal stood by the counter, watching the neon sign flicker outside the window. He didn't know that the simple choice he had made that night, quietly, humbly, with no thought of reward, was about to change his life forever. The morning sun peeked through the thin curtains of Jamal's bedroom, waking him earlier than usual. Their small apartment was quiet, though the faint hum of traffic outside and the distant barking of dogs drifted through the cracked window. Jamal sat on the edge of his bed, rubbing his eyes. He had school that day, and later another long shift at the diner. His stomach rumbled faintly, a reminder that dinner last night had been light. They had little food left in the fridge, but he pushed the thought aside. Pulling on his jacket, he was about to head out when a sound unlike any he had ever heard in his neighborhood reached his ears. A deep, smooth hum of an engine, expensive, powerful, foreign here among the rusted sedans and dented pickup trucks that usually lined the street. Curious, he stepped to the window. A sleek black luxury car had just pulled to the curb. Its polished surface reflected the morning light, gleaming like something out of a dream. Neighbors paused on their porches, children stopped their games, and even a man walking his dog stood frozen, staring at the vehicle. It didn't belong here, in this part of town where every building showed its age and every family struggled to get by. Jamal's heart skipped. He stepped outside just as the driver's door opened. From the car emerged a tall man in a tailored suit, his shoes shining, his posture straight and commanding. His hair was neatly combed, his watch glinting as he adjusted his cuff. Everything about him spoke of wealth, power, and a life worlds away from Jamal's. The man's eyes swept the street before landing on Jamal, standing barefoot on the steps of his apartment. Without hesitation, the man walked toward him with a purposeful stride. Jamal froze, unsure what to think. Had he done something wrong? Why would someone like this come to him? "Are you Jamal?" the man asked, his voice deep, calm, but carrying an unmistakable weight of authority. Jamal swallowed hard. "Why yes, sir. I'm Jamal." The man extended his hand. "My name is Charles Whitman." Jamal shook his hand nervously, confused. I don't understand. Why are you here?" Charles studied him for a moment, then let out a breath. "The elderly couple you helped last night at the diner, they're my parents." The words hit Jamal like a wave. He blinked in shock. "Your parents?" "Yes," Charles said softly, his expression shifting, warmth replacing his earlier sternness. "They told me everything. How they went into that diner with only enough to share one small meal. How a kind young man paid for their food without asking for recognition. They said you reminded them of the goodness they thought the world had forgotten." Jamal's chest tightened. He hadn't expected anyone to find out. It was never about being noticed. He looked down, embarrassed. "It wasn't anything, sir. I just wanted to help." Charles shook his head firmly. "No, it was something. You gave them dignity. You gave them hope, and that means more than you realize." At that moment, the driver of the car stepped out, holding a thick envelope and a small set of keys. Charles took them and held them out to Jamal. "This," Charles said, handing over the envelope, "is a scholarship fund I've set up in your name. It will cover your education, all the way through college, if that's what you choose. No more worrying about whether you can afford to study." He then placed the keys into Jamal's trembling hand. "And these belong to a house. A safe, comfortable place where you and your mother can live without fear of eviction or hunger." Jamal stared at the items in disbelief, his hands shaking. I can't take this," he whispered. "It's too much." Charles stepped closer, his voice steady. "Listen to me. My parents spent their lives giving to others, but in their old age, they have fallen on hard times. They could have been forgotten, invisible. But you saw them. You gave from the little you had, even when it meant sacrifice. That is the kind of heart the world needs. And it's the kind of heart I want to invest in." At that moment, the door,